Hi, you're watching or listening, depending on the streaming platform of your preference, The Green New Perspective, a podcast where we talk about innovations happening within clean tech, nature tech, agri-tech, and biotech space. This episode is proudly sponsored by New Perspective, a Boston-based marketing agency working with clean tech clients. So if you want to learn more about our sponsor, please check out the info in the description of this episode. So what are we focusing on today? We are redefining electric trucks with Forrest North and Jason Marks, the CTO and CEO of TELO. TELO is a company that's breaking the mold, introducing a compact electric pickup challenging traditional truck sizes. It's a game changer. It's fitting a 4-door cabin and 5-foot truck bed into a mini hardtop's length, shaking up the standard. So join us as we talk about the secrets behind these groundbreaking innovations and get ready to get a whole new perspective on electric pickups. Hi, Jason. Hi, Forrest. It's really lovely having you here on the Green New Perspective podcast. So let's talk about TELO's brand story. What motivated the inception of TELO, and what market opportunities did you identify that led to its creation?
It all kind of started from us having a big problem around commuting in dense urban areas. I live in downtown San Francisco. I have a 150-pound dog that I take to the beach every weekend. And there's no way he's going in the back of my sedan or even my SUV because he gets disgustingly sandy. So having a truck is kind of a requirement for me. Having a truck, I can throw him in the back with a cover on the top, and I can go snowboarding or mountain biking. It was just such a useful thing for me as a consumer that lives in a downtown area. But I couldn't ever really navigate the city. It was stressful to drive downtown. It was stressful to find parking, and it was just impossible to actually use my vehicle for actually enjoying the city I live in. So exists this big fundamental problem with commuting in downtown areas, and we set out to try to find the way to solve it. This wasn't our first kind of guess at it. We started by actually thinking about the small, like micro mobility and two-wheel transport between scooters and motorcycles, and worked on those projects for a while. It's actually where we got to know each other pretty well. We were Forrest was working on a scooter project. I was working on a motorcycle project. We ended up working on the motorcycle project together for many years. And then we realized that, that wasn't a good marketplace, a good way to actually change the game and change the way that we actually commute. And there existed this huge problem around trucks in cities that was fundamentally causing the pain that I was feeling. So when we actually went out and did a market survey of around 200 people in LA and San Francisco around different types of modes of transportation, we gave them opportunities to look at like small cars, low speed vehicles, vans, sedans, hatchbacks, motorcycles, everything. We offered an opportunity to look at a small truck, and almost everybody, 89% of the people we surveyed, said the most useful thing that they could have in a downtown area would be a small truck. And so we decided that that was the best way to pivot our direction.
I have to say I'm surprised because there's a perception that Americans like big trucks.
Yes, there definitely is, and we'll get into that. My interest has always been in getting off of fossil fuels since I was a kid. So I built a radio controlled electric solar car when I was in high school. Then I did that when I was at Stanford, did the Stanford Solar Car Project. That turned into Tesla. That turned into my first motorcycle startup. So I've been working in EVs my whole life, and trucks since 2010 have just been getting bigger and bigger. And it really felt like we were going the wrong direction to electrify these enormous trucks. And so it was really struck a chord with me when we made this switch. I also have been a truck owner of large trucks and small trucks. And so really like the idea of a high capacity, high utility, small truck that you can maneuver, not just in the city, but also I grew up in the country, and there's a lot of small roads getting in between trees. Like big trucks are actually not that useful in a lot of outdoor situations.
So can you tell me where do you see that TELO stands in the EV truck market?
The truck market in general is a really interesting and really bizarre story. Um,
Yeah.
so I'll actually take you all the way back to the 1970s, where we had a gas crisis in the U.S., and so the Environmental Protection Agency created a series of laws that they gave to automakers that said, "Hey, you need to save fuel. You need to have more fuel economic cars." But they only applied it to passenger cars, and they exempted trucks. So since the 1970s, a lot of automakers started moving their vehicles to trucks, SUVs, crossovers, and calling them trucks, so they could get kind of skirt the EPA's rules around fuel economy. And the EPA wisened up in 2010 and said, "Hey, we're not going to let you guys just call everything trucks and get away with this anymore. We're going to give you rules for trucks. We're going to give you fuel economy standards." So that means how many miles you can drive per gallon of fuel you consume. We're going to give you these standards. But what they did is they based it on the size of the vehicle. They based it on the length and width, the footprint of the vehicle. And they did is they said, the bigger you build your car, the bigger you build your truck, sorry, the worse fuel economy you're allowed to have. So what that means is that they tried to say, hey, if we're building a semi truck, then you can then you can have really bad fuel economy because you're doing a big job. Maybe it requires a lot of fuel. But if you're building a small truck, you have to be more fuel efficient. But in reality, what the automakers were able to do is say, hey, I'm not able to actually build my vehicle this fuel efficient. So I'm just going to build it slightly bigger because that makes it easier to hit these requirements. So every year, the automakers started looking at the projections of what those fuel economy standards were, and they made their cars bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So now every single truck that's made by the US automotive industry and many in Japan and other places all reside at the biggest point they can be at, where that line for fuel economy flattens out. They all sit there. So it left, so to your question, it left this massive market of small trucks untouched because all the automakers were forced to move larger. Now, what's really interesting in terms of the electric pickup truck market is that electric pickup truck makers started building their trucks as an electric version of those big trucks the automakers are making. So they were not beholden to the fuel economy standards that the other automakers were beholden to, but they chose to go compete against them in the same size and footprint of truck. So they now exist on that far edge of the size. They're the big trucks, even electric, they're big, and left this huge gap in the market that they could have filled because they're electric, but they didn't. And that's where we live. We live in that small, ultra compact, but high performance truck space.
And one of the interesting things after we launched in June is, and I think that speaks to this market, is that we launched to consumers to show there was demand. We were really surprised by the response we got. It was great. But another surprise was that in the week after we launched, fleet companies called us because they said they couldn't buy trucks now that were small enough to do the things they need to do. So it's like there's this kind of weird, culture of like, these big work trucks are for work, but they're really not. They're kind of just big, puffy trucks that don't do much more than a much smaller truck did in the past. And so companies that actually do work are looking for vehicles that fit.
Yeah, and without using the names of the companies, just the examples they gave us were pretty astounding. Like people that have to go downtown and pick up a garbage bin out of an underground parking lot in a condo and bring it to the city. It requires a truck that can lift a 2,000-pound garbage bin. But if it's too big, you actually can't make the turns in the underground parking lot. So you're out of luck. It's too big to do. So you need both a small, compact vehicle and also one that's got high capability to lift. You've also got vehicles that are clearing trees in downtown areas. They are cleaning up the roadways. They need to be able to go on the highway to navigate the city. So a small golf cart-like vehicle won't do it, but they need to be small enough to fit in the alleyways that they're driving through. And there's just so many examples of like if you have a smaller truck with the same capabilities as a full-size truck, you can do your job better. Like one person that really resonates with me is I was speaking to a contractor that works in downtown San Francisco, and he was telling me that he has to go park a mile away from his job site every day. And he has to walk his 50-pound bag of tools to the job site, a mile. When he goes out to lunch, he has to leave his tools there because he can't bring them back to his car and lock them up. When he comes back from lunch, people will take his tools. They'll be gone. So he's spending an extra hour of his time just walking to and from his car. and he's losing his tools every single time he does it. So he's just in this really stressful situation that if he could just park next to his job site, he would be fine. But one thing I really want to point out is that, because I know this is very much a sustainability conversation, like even these problems are problems that exist for the consumer and for the fleet vehicles, but that has so many downstream climate negative effects, right? So one of the big things is if you electrify just that big truck, the big truck that exists, you're effectively just adding 2 to 3,000 pounds of batteries to a big truck. And that has so many negative consequences because it adds to rolling resistance. It adds to, because the batteries are tall, it actually requires you to take up more space in the car. So now it adds to wind resistance. And it's so much energy now required to move that vehicle. So in order to get a 350-mile range vehicle, you have to have a 200 kilowatt hour battery pack and a vehicle that weighs 8,000 pounds. So you're tearing up roadways. You're extremely dangerous for pedestrians. If they get hit, they're done for. You have issues with tire particulates because these vehicles are so big going into roadways. And then the crazy thing is that if you look, if on average, the grid isn't completely clean right now. So if you look at on average, the carbon emissions burned per mile driven of a big electric truck is about the same as the carbon emissions of a small gas vehicle.
So there's not much of a difference there. And what is amazing about your truck is also the price. Because, well, we're used to, like you said, big EVs, like let's say Rivian R1T, which is 70K plus. So how did you manage to keep the low price?
Yeah, I mean, part of the beauty of creating a high performance but compact vehicle is that it requires fewer materials and a little less powerful of current draws and motors to actually get the same performance you would get with another bigger vehicle. So we have a smaller battery pack, and that smaller battery pack still gives us 350 miles of range. It's still 106 kilowatt hours, but it's not 200 kilowatt hours, which means that we have almost half the amount of raw materials in the battery alone. And that means that the vehicle's lighter. When the vehicle's lighter, you need less structural material in the vehicle to carry just as much. Our vehicle shell itself is a smaller footprint, less aluminum material on the exterior of the vehicle. All these things add up without actually compromising the experience of the driver.
And we're also, not going for a lot of luxury items. We're going for fit for purpose, which is where our name comes from. We really want a vehicle that can do a lot, but can still be accessible to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. But can we talk about your ideal customer? Because you mentioned that you want it to be a utility car, but you also would like people to use it for like you mentioned, to go to the beach, to go to the forest, to go hiking, biking, whatever. So what would actually be your perfect customer, your target audience?
Yeah, mm-hmm. About 60% of the market is commercial and 40% is consumer. So it's about that split. But we're not going. We're in past experience, it's hard to go directly to fleets without having a consumer product. And you see this in vehicles as well. So consumers help build the buzz, they help build the brand, and they help fleet companies believe you're going to exist, right? Because you're out there. Fleet companies have a longer sales cycle, and they, it can be a little bit hard sometimes to launch a startup directly towards fleets.
Yeah, and so for our ideal consumers, for ideal fleet customers, we're talking about people that currently drive pickup trucks and vans in downtown areas, people that are working in construction areas and plumbing and electricians, everything that does work in downtown cities in LA, San Francisco, Seattle, you name it, like big downtown metropolitan areas that have this challenge of being able to park their vehicle in a downtown area. For consumers, we actually have a pretty good understanding of where our pre-orders come from and who our demographics are, based on the conversations that we have in our Discord channel, which is a highly active Discord channel. We have a good understanding of who our consumers are. And for the most part, they do live in downtown areas. There are plenty of exceptions. Don't get me wrong. If any of you Discord listeners are listening to this one, I know I recognize that not everybody is from downtown. But we have a lot of downtown livers that love mountain biking. They love surfing. We have a ton of surfers. Ever since Kelly Slater placed a pre-order, we've been just getting tons and tons of surfers coming our way. We have a lot of mountain bikers. We have a lot of people that have small children. So we have a lot of people ask about being able to fit car seats in our vehicle. But really, it's all like we have a lot of active lifestyle metropolitan people.
And do you feel there's a shift there in the mindset from buying big, heavy,
We don't think from the consumer side we're going to get a lot of people that currently drive an F-350 to move over to our vehicle.
uh-huh.
I don't think we're going to get that, which is okay. I think that
Yeah.
the truth is, in the not too distant future, about 70% of Americans are going to live in downtown metropolitan areas. So it's the biggest market, and it's a good way to really influence that market because we really want to make the biggest dent in our carbon emissions. It's going to be through the biggest market. So we think that people that are buying crossovers, vehicles that are capable of doing some level of off-roading that are either considered crossovers or SUVs, that's really our target demographic.
I have to say, when we were planning to do a podcast with TELO, we had a conversation in our agency, and I'm in Europe, and most of my colleagues are in Boston, and they were so skeptical. Like, who is going to drive a small truck? And I was like, it's perfect for Europe.
Yeah.
It's perfect for Europe. Yeah, we're driving small cars. We have small street. This is perfect solution. And you don't have many options with smaller trucks, actually. So, like you said, they're usually made to be big horsepowers. Everything large. So yeah, I really like this idea. I personally do.
Yeah, I appreciate it. We have a lot of European interests, actually. We haven't announced
Yeah.
our European launch, but there really doesn't exist like a pickup truck for Europe, is what we found out.
Mhm.
There's been some like people that have hinted maybe they would do that in the past, but no one's actually released that pickup truck. So we're talking to actually governments and municipalities in Europe right now and trying to understand, does it make sense for us to maybe have a branch office over there and work towards delivering a vehicle for Europe.
One other thing I wanted to talk about with you is about design,
Yeah.
because you have a quite famous head of design, Yves Berge. So can you tell me about the design philosophy and principles that guide you to develop TeleTruck as it is, and the brand? The brand looks great.
Yeah, I mean, really, Eve would be the best to talk about that. He's got an amazing team, and he's really taken on all of the design side, so the exterior, the website, the branding, all of that. So one thing that did drive us towards Eve is I've worked with Eve before. We launched a motorcycle project back in 2009 at TED, and so I worked with him, and I knew what he could do, and I. Love his modern and simple modern approach, and that's really, we wanted that in the truck. So he was just the perfect fit for that. There's a bunch of benefits. Like, one, there isn't really kind of a clean modern looking truck, I believe, that has that kind of modern aesthetic. So we see a lot of like weird wrinkles and kind of like badging on the kind of trucks that are out there now that I personally don't think fit in the kind of urban environment as well. Also, there's some interesting things around like really clean lines and simple form make tooling and prototyping and things easier. So it's actually a good path to go for this truck. So it really fit in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Forrest is saying there in a different way, so there's been a trend in automotive design right now to move to a very sharp angular thing. It's like the current trend in design of that real sharp angular. They call it tension, when it's like you're pulling a sheet over something and it creates tension and creates a crease. And that's the kind of current status of a lot of vehicle design right now. Almost every vehicle you see on the road has an abundance of these creases in there. And while that may give you kind of an aggressive look in some ways, I can see how you can make that argument. It also actually makes it more costly to build the vehicle, because every crease you have creates a really hard way to actually implement that in tooling. So it requires like a concave curve and has to peak and come out. That is actually a fairly expensive way to do it. So not only are we looking at a modern aesthetic, a more sculptural design, breaking away from a lot of the automotive kind of trends of this aggressive creasiness, but we're also looking at ways in which we can actually save cost in the actual tooling of our vehicle, where it makes it so we don't have problems like large panel gaps because of the ease of tooling in the vehicle.
And one other thing that I think Eve is really excellent at is he's looking at design. He's spent his whole life in design. So when he's looking at design, it's in the future, and that's exactly what you need in a vehicle program, because the cycle is fairly long to like go from concept to being out on the street. So your design can't be like what someone would love today. It's got to be what they're going to love 3 years from now. And he's great at that. And I've experienced that in the past. Like his design with the motorcycle, it was polarizing. There were motorcyclists that hated it. There were motorcyclists that loved it. I think when you look back at it, it looks beautiful. I still get lots of compliments on it, and so and I've seen that with his other products as well. So like a great designer will really look is living in the future.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, he's quite famous for that. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so where do you feel your main competitors in the EV truck market are, and if you feel like you have them, because from this conversation now, I feel like you're unique, quite unique.
Yeah.
How do you think that you're going to differentiate your brand?
Yeah. Well, like fundamentally, if you look at how we kind of tell people about our vehicle, the first thing we tell them is it's a crew cab pickup truck with the range of a Tesla in the footprint of a two-door Mini Cooper. And they go, "What? A two-door Mini Cooper? That's crazy." But we think about it, there doesn't really exist a vehicle that kind of fits all those capabilities. It's only really been possible by electrifying the powertrain, by using the state of the art in safety and materials technology. Like it's only really been possible now to do this vehicle, even. So that's why it doesn't really exist in the marketplace. There are people that are kind of moving taking baby steps in the direction that we've taken, and we feel that there are people that are dipping their toe in the water, but we're taking a full on cannonball into the water, right? So we realize that you have to swing big to make the biggest impact. And for that reason, we don't think there's a ton of people that are really competing with us directly. We think there's people that look at our vehicle and they would compare it against other vehicles in the marketplace. They would say, well,
Yeah,
yeah, so if I want a truck with the same utility, am I willing to trade off an extra 6 feet of length? Like that doesn't sound like it's useful to me. Or if I want a vehicle in this footprint, am I willing to take a third the range of doing that? Which is really the only other vehicles that exist in this footprint have a third of the range. So for that reason, like we're really trying to be a market leader in this space. But we do think our consumers and our fleet customers will be looking at other vehicles to solve the same need. And that's why we want to come out as very clearly using our size as an advantage. It's not like we're like a low cost, slow, lethargic vehicle. We're 500 horsepower, 0 to 60 in 4 seconds, 5 seats comfortably. A 4x8 sheet of plywood can fit in with the midgate down. Like we've got all the things that you really want, the bells and whistles you want in a high utility truck. And the fact that it's small is a selling point. It's like, yes, now it's small too. I can use it. And we've had like, I wouldn't necessarily advertise this out too much, but we've had a lot of our pre-order consumers just show up to our office sometimes, and we're like, okay, let me show you around real quick. I won't encourage people to listen to this to go do that for us, but when they do show up, we do have usually a very good short conversation with them. They tell us, here's why I love the truck. Here's why I'm so interested in it. Here's how I'm going to use it. And so we hear from them about like the fact that it's small is the selling point.
Yeah, you tell them, join our Discord
Yes,
group.
yes,
So
exactly what we tell them.
It's great to meet them too.
can our listener join the Discord? Since we're a marketing agency, I have to ask you some of the marketing questions. So, can you tell me what strategy did you use to promote the product, and what channels have been most effective
Yeah.
in reaching those customers that we mentioned?
Eve has so much influence and sway in the space and around the minds and hearts of people. So his just presence and his involvement and his general excitement about what we're doing has been a huge marketing push for us, because he has social reach, he has regular PR reach, he has that reach in general. I will say that we launched our vehicle in June relatively leanly, I would say. I wouldn't say cheaply, I would just leanly. We had a great PR agency in Darris who you've met. But we really, between Eve's team and Darris, like we did not necessarily swing for the walls when it came to a marketing push, but we were just so much organic interest. Like if you look at our Google Analytics, a lot of what people came about were organic interest or clicks from news articles that came out, and then growth from there. So it's actually really interesting to look at, like, if you get super excited about a product, you want to tell all your friends. So it's so funny, if you look at like our pre-order list, you'll see like one person purchased from some obscure, town in Rhode Island, and then like 10 other people purchased from that same town in Rhode Island.
Mhm.
So you can see the trend of like somebody just be like, oh, I'm so excited about that. Boom, 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 boom. All my friends now know it too.
And that starts with us being excited about it, right? So we're making a product that we want. Like we are waiting for this product. We're making it. Um, our customers have that same kind of passion.
Yeah. All in all, our customer acquisition cost is relatively low, like extremely low, less than a tenth that of another automotive company. And that's simply because there's just so much excitement, and it's so organic what people do here because it doesn't exist in the market. It's not just another truck that I have to go compare. I don't have to create an Excel sheet with all of the different trucks lined up and compare the specifications. It's very clear what we're doing, and it's very different.
And how do you plan to make it accessible to customers in the USA?
Yeah, well, first it comes from getting a price point that's reasonable for the performance you get in our vehicle. I think that's really important. So we did a lot of market research on that price point and what that price point would be for a vehicle like we're trying to deliver. And I think that we nailed that price point. It's not a slow, light, low speed vehicle. It is a performance vehicle, but still at an accessible price point. And so you get all the value you would get in a big electric truck or in a big truck at the same cost point as kind of the market leaders in the regular truck space. So that was really important to us, as well as, really targeting the demographic of people that we think would benefit the most from our vehicle. Showing our vehicle in dense urban areas, getting people excited, like, oh, that looks just like my neighborhood. I can envision my vehicle being parked in that same location in my neighborhood. That's the kind of area that we really want people to get excited about.
And when we talk about EV trends, EV truck market, we mentioned here Europe and America. So let's talk about Europe and America. What trends have you observed, and how does TELO align with these trends?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of trends that we're seeing in the world of EVs. So I'll start at the very high level price point piece. One, we see a lot of people that are really hyper focused on price. So we see a lot of people that are talking about a price war to happen between a lot of different companies. We see a lot of excitement around the low cost version of EVs coming out of other areas of the world. So there is a lot of people that are talking about that. And I think the reason they're talking about that is because they've commoditized a lot of the EV space now. It's like, what's really the difference between this EV sedan and this EV sedan, or this EV crossover and this EV crossover? Like you get like that same problem where you have to create the Excel sheet and compare all the specs individually, because there aren't people that are super excited around it, something that was different and uniquely solving their problem. But did you want to?
Yeah, I think there's several other trends that we could talk about. I think one trend is on charging. So it's been a great trend to see other automakers shift over to the Tesla standard, which is the NACS. I mean, my last company before the scooter company, actually, so 2 companies ago, was PlugShare. And it's an app for finding electric vehicle charging stations. And through that, we got all the data from all the, basically the charging world. And I can tell you that Tesla is the only network that's essentially fulfilling, I would say, the needs of people to have a reliable network. There's nothing else out there that you can rely on from a whole network standpoint. And so that's just critical for EVs to take hold with more than the early adopters.
And I do want to talk about.
So that's a great trend. And so we are going to be native for that exactly. Standard, which other companies will be as well. But I think that's a great trend for the whole market.
The trend that I want to talk about, though, is something that's actually probably kind of worked as a disadvantage for a while, and now is kind of like an advantage. Like, we saw a bunch of EV companies spring up in the last 20 years, right? We saw a ton of different companies, some of which have met astronomical success, like Tesla, some of which have not, right? And some of which have failed and have been in the news a lot lately. And we see that, like, a lot of people got super excited around the success that came from Tesla and tried to replicate it, but they made a lot of mistakes along the way. And the biggest mistake they made was trying to get to high volume, high profit, like high volume sales to get to profitability. So 100,000 plus units per year, and making decisions as if they could do that, as if that money were free. So spending $1 billion trying to become a major automaker without actually even delivering vehicles, going through crash safety, testing the market to see if it's even there. So all that happened, and companies just they failed to deliver on a lot of different areas, and it's led to like this downward trend in people's minds of like, oh, an EV startup, that's really hard to do. It's never going to come to market. But the reality is like the things that have happened over the last 20 years have kind of crafted what's been possible in the last 2 years. So one thing that happened over the last 20 years is companies had to build their own drivetrain components. They had to build motors and inverters and BMS, and they had to build all these different like expensive components of the vehicle. And now it's gotten to a point where the tier one suppliers to automakers have figured it out. They've commoditized a lot of those components, and we can now buy them off the shelf for inexpensively per unit cost, which is crazy to me because that's a part of a company that had to spend $100 million to develop this product, and now I can go buy it for $1,000 off the shelf. So it's a big trend. On top of that, there's been probably two other things that are really unique. One is that we're seeing a big a growth of contract manufacturing in vehicles across the world, but particularly in the US, we're now wisening up and realizing that we have to actually compete in that space. Not just like the big names of contract manufacturing in the world, but even smaller shops that can build vehicles at 100 to 5,000 units per year, and they can do so profitably and share that amongst a bunch of other companies. So there exist companies in California, Detroit, and actually all over the US that can actually build 5,000 vehicles per year for an automaker by amortizing their cost of their tools and everything over time and all the things associated with that, which is like really unique because that's typically been the valley of death of startups, is to go between 100 press vehicles and get to profitability. Like if you can do that early at 5,000 vehicles, that's amazing. Then you can scale and get to profitability at 50,000 vehicles if you've done that. And the last big thing is really how software plays the role in vehicle development and vehicle testing. So I worked in as an automotive supplier for vehicles, and I did a lot of safety systems, autonomous driving, driver assistance features over the last 10, 12 years. And in fact, I worked on some of the very first radar and LiDAR chipsets that went into ADAS and autonomy. There's been a big shift in like having to build hundreds of prototypes, having to build breadboards of vehicles, doing all the design manually, to how we use software to develop and test vehicles now. So there's a big trend in the automotive industry called 100% virtual validation, which is really a process of saying that I can develop my vehicle entirely in software and I can test it entirely in software, so that by the time I build a prototype vehicle, all I'm doing is checking that my software tests were correct, which means that I don't have to build tens or hundreds of vehicles. I can build 5. I mean, Koenigsegg is kind of famous for this. They crashed one vehicle to get European and US regulatory crash safety. Just one. That's amazing. Like everything else is done in
Yeah,
simulation.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it speeds up the process so much. I wanted to ask you, do you feel like there's challenges when you're communicating these innovations towards the market? You're practically launching some innovative technologies, some unique opportunities for drivers in the USA. So do you feel like there are challenges there when you're trying to present them to the mass market?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of preconceived notions around how the automotive market works. The reason that we're able to do all this is because we have major innovations in safety and battery technology. Like that's the two core elements of our technological innovations. And a lot of people get excited about those and go, "Well, isn't that your core business? Like you're these two innovations?" And we say, "Well, these two innovations don't exist alone. Like if you add these two innovations together, you can create a completely different market of vehicles, and then you've got the ability to actually make the biggest dent in climate change." Like we're talking about, just because we made the most volumetrically space efficient battery pack, if a vehicle is 10,000 pounds and 30 feet long, it's not going to matter to them. But the minute you try to say, let me create a performance vehicle that's less than 13 feet long, now they're like, okay, well, how do you possibly do that? Well, that's where the battery technology really stands out. It's things like that. So that's the first big notion we get, is like, okay,
It's kind of why we built this buck and launched it. Actually, was because people just didn't believe it.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah,
would tell
yeah.
people,
When I was doing like a little research, I saw like the articles mentioning it. It sounds too good to be true.
yeah, And they still don't. We have one of our engineers has a Miata, and it's longer than our vehicle, and
Uh-huh.
it's often out in the parking lot. And we'll talk to investors and people about it, and they're like, no, 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 no. And we'll actually have to measure it, go out in the parking lot and measure it, and they're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Oh, we have a seating buck that you might have seen in like the Motor Trend article. The Motor Trend editor was 6'10", and we had a couple other people that were in their 6 foot. They sat behind him, and they sat in our seating buck, and they're just like, I can't believe we fit. Like that doesn't make any sense. How is that possible?
Yeah, one of the ways we communicated, I mean, it's a good question that you asked, is we built actual scale models, of
Uh,
toy cars so that you could actually see these are 1/24th models, and we have a little Mini Cooper, we have our vehicle, they're the exact same length, and we've got a Ford and a Tesla, and so just people like to have something to touch. Because it's such a hard thing to communicate.
so my last question for you is, where do you see the EV truck market, where it's headed, and what opportunities and challenges do you see for Tello?
Yeah, I'm going to use Forrest words here, so I'll see how well I do it. Um, we see in 10 years that any vehicle you see with a long hood, a long nose, will look dated. Like what,
Obsolete.
obsolete. What use is that to them? If you have storage elsewhere in the vehicle, like what use is a long trunk that's not actually serving any need? It's getting in the way of you actually navigating the roadways. Like we think that that's the vision. Like every single F-150 you see right now in downtown San Francisco and downtown LA and downtown New York will be a Tello. That's what we want to see happen. Because if you look at like what we didn't say yet, which I really should have said in the beginning, was light duty trucks constitute such a major part of carbon emissions in the US. If you look at all the carbon emissions across all economic sectors, that means retail, transportation, and industry, agriculture, whatever. You aggregate everything. 10.5% of that is just light duty trucks in the US. It's a wild amount of carbon emissions that light duty trucks produce. I mean, we're talking hundreds of megatons of carbon emissions on light duty trucks. And if we can have a vehicle that has is the most efficient version of the work of a light duty truck, like we can make the biggest dent in climate change. We can see an 8 to 9% reduction in carbon emissions across the US. And that's really like, if you could snap your fingers and make like one decision, just move all light duty trucks to Telos, like how many other things in the world exist that you can do something like that? And now you've got a nearly double digit reduction in carbon emissions. Like that's the change we want to see.
But where do you see the challenge?
Well, it's always a challenge to bring a vehicle to market. That's certainly a challenge. Yeah,
Like we're an
we're pretty
automotive
excited
like
so
we're an
far.
automotive company. Like let's not kid ourselves. It's not like we think we can do this. Like we can bring a vehicle to market in the most capital efficient way that's ever been done before because of the innovations that have happened over the last 20 years and what we've learned from being in Detroit and Silicon Valley. Like we think that that's possible. But let's not kid ourselves. It's still a vehicle company. It still requires capital and it still is going to need people to get excited about it and need to prove that you've got a market and prove that people want this and that you can deliver. So we've got all that ahead of us right now. And that is still like any company,
Yeah.
it's hard, but we're a vehicle company.
Yeah, I think another challenge is just kind of on the marketing, which you were kind of getting to, in that by cutting off the nose, when you're driving around, it actually feels so much more stress free. Like you feel more free. You can see in front of you when you come up to, like, you're pulling into a street. You don't have to do that thing where you're like leaning your head way forward and you still have 4 feet of your car in front of you, that if you scooch it out and you can't see the cars coming, they're going to run into you, right? Like it's hard to communicate the freedom you get when that is gone. And so, it's
Mm-hmm.
going to take, people, it doesn't scale well to just have everyone have to drive something to like feel that. So like communicating the beauty and freedom of having a vehicle that isn't in your way all the time, I think is something that is a challenge we have on the marketing side.
Yeah. I also think that, we're doing things in safety that are super like innovative, and we're using some of the best in the automotive technology that's been developed in the automotive industry for the last 10 years. There is still some conceived notion that we have very small hood of our vehicle. You see it, it's like we have about 18 inches of mechanical crumple in our vehicle. So it's still relatively small. And the things we do to actually make that an extremely safe vehicle, not only for occupants, but also for pedestrians, like Pedestrian deaths are at an all-time high on U.S. roadways. Over 9,000 pedestrians died. This will have died this year from being hit by vehicles. 3 times more of them are hit by trucks than any other vehicle. It's wild, like what we've done. We want to make sure that it's very well communicated that, like, if somebody has a family and they're worried about their children's safety, and when they're driving this vehicle, they have kids in the back, they want to make sure they're safe, that we are out of the gates showing how safe our vehicle is and convincing people that even though we don't have this long hood, that long hood's actually not saving your children. It's the other things that happen in that crash, the science of the crash, that really save your children.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that. Have to say that these challenges are common within the clean tech, EV tech space. A lot of people that we've talked to within this podcast are telling me that communicating innovation uh, is not a small issue, you know. But hey, I guess this podcast is there to help as well. So,
Appreciate it.
thank you for this conversation. If you have something more to add, now is the time. And I would like to tell us which channels can our listeners or viewers visit to support you, to get informed about TELO, to get in touch with you if they want, to buy.
Yeah. It's all on telotrucks.com, TELO trucks. And we've got a Discord channel. That's a great way to engage as well.
Yeah,
We'd love to hear from you.
We have almost 1,000 active users on Discord right now. And any feedback you give us on Discord, we have a way of actually tagging it and tracking it, and it can go into our engineering channels. So if you want to see something on our interior, which hasn't been fully fleshed out yet, so if you have feedback on that, and you say, hey, I really need this type of screen, I really need this type of pass through for the leg, like all that stuff, it actually goes into our engineering channels and becomes part of our product roadmap. So like we can actually pull from that when we want people's feedback around what to do next in our vehicle platform, which is really cool because we have like a circular way of like, we then can share pictures. Like, is this what you're talking about? Okay, cool. Let's do that. So I think that's a really cool way to interact with us, and you actually get a chance to influence the direction we go with our company. We do have an Instagram as well. We haven't posted a ton yet there because we're still kind of trickling out little hints, and we want to keep a lot of that feedback on Discord because it's where we really can interact with our potential user base. And yeah, all of that is available on telotrucks.com.
We've come to an end of yet another episode of the Green New Perspective podcast, and I hope that our podcast has become your go-to place to learn more about clean tech, agri-tech, nature tech, or biotech space. If you like this episode featuring Jason and Forrest from TELO, you can check the description of this episode and you can find all of their social media handles there, as well as the link to the Discord group they're mentioning during our talk. Of course, you can subscribe to our podcast and stay updated to all the innovations happening within clean tech scene. Also, you can leave us reviews, leave us comments. We really love to hear from you. This is the only way to upgrade our content. So really thank you for all the support we got from you so far. See you next time in the next episode with our amazing guests that are going to come to the Green New Perspective podcast. See you then. Bye.